Hello, everybody. It's Stephen and Walter here for another episode of So Chatty. This is episode 130 for January the 26th, 2024. We're just about through January. Geez, where's it gone? Fast. So, today, the main part of today's So Chatty, we're going to start our sessions about machine embroidery. We'll talk more about that in a moment. But first of all, let's see what I've been working on. And this is, for those of you that went to the virtual retreat with Stephanie and Shannon, you are probably familiar with this pattern because this is one of Stephanie Stitch's original patterns. Now, her pattern, you put 4 of the blocks together and created a small wall hanging, but I decided I liked the design of it so much that I was making it into a full-size quilt. And believe me, this is a big quilt because each one of those blocks measures 18 inches. So by the time you got sashing on it and the border around it, this little sucker comes out to 82 by 82. That's a big quilt. This is just the top you're seeing right now. What I'm going to do next, of course, is get it on Lucy, and I'm going to do custom quilting on this one. I'm going to do different motifs inside each block, and then I'm going to do the sashing and the borders in something different. And I spent all day yesterday playing with Lucy to try and learn how to do that. And I'm very proud of myself because I was able to do a lot of things with that on a trial basis. And I think I understand how it works. And it's kind of fun. Takes you longer to quilt a quilt when you do it this way, of course, rather than edge to edge. But you know, I'm getting tired of edge to edge. I want to do something a little bit more spectacular, and I think this one will lend itself to that because the way it's designed, each of the blocks. So that's my plan. Probably start on that next week, and it's going to take me a while. So of course, as always, when it's done, I'll show it to you. By the way, I came up with a name for this. Stephanie's original pattern was called Winter Blues, because she did it all in blue. And as I said, it just had 4 of these blocks and sashing and a border around it. I'm changing the name. I'm going to call it Stephanie's Ninja Stars because somebody suggested to me that the stars in each block kind of look like that little tool, that little weapon actually, that ninja people, I guess, throw at each other. They should buy a frisbee. Be a lot less painful. But anyways, that's what's going to be. Stephanie's Ninja Stars. Yeah. And what have you been doing?
Not much. I still have to sew my quilt together. I've got, it's almost done.
Uh-huh.
But I haven't got to it yet.
Uh-huh. How's that shirt coming along that you started?
Yeah, well, I haven't done much sewing. You're all you do is sew all day long. Well, I don't. So
I haven't figured out what you do all day long.
yeah, I do other things.
Yeah. Mostly
I'm
looking
still
at
planning
things
for
on YouTube.
Australian thing. I
Oh
got
yeah.
half of our hotel's booked. So
Okay, well, get on with that too. All right, mush mush. Anyways, so that's what Walter's been up to. So, some announcements. As always, Wednesdays, 9 a.m. Sewing with Stephanie and Stephen. Links in the show notes. Plans for the 10,000 bash. You've probably already seen the video I made about that with the explanation for it. Registration starts next Thursday at 9 a.m. and all the instructions for that are in that video. So if you haven't seen that, go to it. But basically, do not send me an email before 9 o'clock because I will ignore it. Yep, I'm trying to make this as fair as I possibly can, and it's not an easy task. So that's one of the ways. So if you send me an email and it comes in at 10 to 9, I will not acknowledge it. They do not come in until 9 o'clock. And when I say 9 o'clock my time, which is Eastern. So if you're in another time zone, Google your time zone and find out what time that your time is to my time, or what 9 o'clock my time is for you and your time zone. So if you're out west, it's going to be earlier. If you're out further east, it's going to be later. So yeah, sorry about that, but I can't make the world stop turning. So that's how that's all going to work. And you snooze, you lose, because I can only handle 96 people. and I have a feeling it's going to fill up really fast. So yeah, but if you have not seen the video, it's on my channel, all about the 10,000 bash. Check it out because it's all the details are there, all of them, and they're in written form as well in the show notes, so you can just copy and paste them into your word processor or whatever you use if you don't want to read off screen, that kind of thing. Okay, so something else coming up this week. It's Walter's birthday tomorrow. He's turning 29 again and 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 again. Okay, you get the point. So what are we doing for Walter's birthday? No idea. I've asked. I've suggested. I have not got any answers. So, and you're probably wondering, what am I getting Walter for his birthday? I've asked. I've made suggestions. And I have no answers. So, I don't know what this old fart wants to do for his birthday.
I want to stay in and have fish and chips.
Fine. Fish and chips it is. Woo! Well, we do have 2 bottles of champagne, though. Actually, they're American champagne. Well, not American, they're French, and they're not even champagne. They're sparkling wine, but we bought them at the Walmart when we were down there. We bought a whole bunch of champagne for New Year's Eve to give everybody, and we had 2 bottles left over. Bunch of teetotalers, I'm telling you. Not the case with Walter. He's a champagne slut. So, yeah. All right. So that's all the announcements, I believe. Yes. Okay. So, as we had mentioned before, we are going to do a series of So Chatties about everything you ever want to know about machine embroidery, but we're afraid to ask. And we're going to start those sessions today. And the goal here is to do another session, and each session is going to build on the previous one. And each week on So Chatty. That'll be our primary focus for the next little while here on So Chatty. Now, why are we doing this? Because we've had a ton of questions about machine embroidery, and you know that both of us have embroidery machines. We both have the same machine, and I love machine embroidery.
You've done more on it than I have.
Yes, I have.
I've done more basic stuff on mine.
Yeah. And I'm on my second embroidery machine since I got rid of the 15,000, but we weren't going to go there. There's a whole video series from back a few years ago about that one. But yeah, I do a lot, and I love machine embroidery. And there's so much you can do with an embroidery machine. But here's the biggest problem that we have heard from people. Oh, I probably should take it out of the box. My husband got it for me for Christmas for my birthday 3 years ago, and I'm afraid to take it out of the box. Wrong. Wrong. And you've heard us say that before too. You've got an expensive machine, okay? Embroidery machines are not cheap. And it doesn't matter what brand you buy, you got to get it out of the box. You can't be afraid of it. It will not destroy the world if you hit the wrong button. It won't destroy you if you hit the wrong button. It isn't that complicated. In fact, in many ways, machine embroidery is easier than standard sewing because, in a sense, you're not doing anything except threading the machine, changing colors, and plugging in the program, and the machine is doing the rest for you. So we're hoping through this series of videos to alleviate your stress level on using your machine. Now, some of you out there, or many of you out there, already have a machine, and you do lots of wonderful things. Or do you? Because what I'm hearing is people are using it to put a cute little character on the pocket of a shirt or on a t-shirt front, or they're using it to monogram towels. Okay, that's a very expensive machine you own if that's all you're going to do with it. Because, really? Why? You could probably do some of that kind of stuff with the decorative stitches on your sewing machine. So we're going to, as part of our series, as we build each week, we're going to show you various projects you can do. And near the end of today's session, we're going to show you some pictures of projects we have done in the past to whet your appetite for this, to show you the great potential embroidery machine has and how to get your money's worth out of it
Yeah.
as
A
well.
lot of it looks complicated, even if you've ended up pulling out the manual out of your machine or whatever and looked at it. It may look intimidating, but it's not that bad.
No, it's not. Now, mind you, I don't know about Bernina or Brother, what their manuals are like, but if they're anything like the manuals from Janome, sometimes they can be a bit of a hindrance because they don't explain things that well. And that's another reason why we're going to share our experiences with you and show you what we have learned. Now, as a caveat here, do we know absolutely everything there's ever to be known about machine embroidery? No. We learn stuff all the time, but we have been doing it. Well, I've been doing machine embroidery for 4 years, maybe a little bit longer than that. And Walter's been doing it for almost as long,
Yeah.
for about,
Only thing is that you've done more varied products than I have. And I've done more like standard
yeah,
embroidery and some freestanding lace. But I'm not intimidated not to do some of the things that he's done. It's just that I just haven't had the desire to do a
no,
project like that. But there's nothing stopping me from doing it.
no.
So
So we have planned out our sessions for this. And as I said, there's quite a few of them. And we eventually are going to come to, when we get near the end of it all, I'm playing with the idea of having a day. It would probably be a Saturday. It'd be like a pop-up sew day, except for machine embroidery, where we can just work on whatever we want to work on, but Walter and I will be there to help troubleshoot. Now, there is one problem with that. We use Genomes. Berninas are different in the way they set up things, so are Brother. However, they all fundamentally have the same thing. It's just a question of knowing what your buttons do. But the principles are the same. So don't worry if you don't own a Janome embroidery machine, if you own another brand. A lot of things we'll talk about will go across the board, and we'll try to keep them relatively generic as well.
I
Oh,
mean,
what?
yeah, the ones that we'll be focusing on Janome 550E machines. However, the same thing would work out for any of the Janome 500
Yeah,
series or whatever,
or
um,
the 400
or the
series.
400 series. And Janome also puts out other machines, like other than strictly the ones we have are strict embroidery machines. There's combination of machines, but all the instructions are very similar to that.
Because Janome basically uses the same computerized interface
Right.
for all their machines. So they may look slightly different, but physically, but it's all the same kind of stuff. And as I said, I have a feeling that in amongst the other brands of machines, a lot of things we're going to talk about, with the help of your manual, you'll be able to find the
Yeah,
equivalent.
a lot of the process like hooping and what stabilizers you use and thread and stuff like that are usually pretty universal across the brands.
Yeah. And the other thing too is we will recommend what we own when it comes to stabilizers, threads, and needles and things like that. What we do. But again, this is personal preference for us. We're not saying that one thing is necessarily better than another. And as we go through these sessions as well, we'll do some troubleshooting. Like when we've had a problem, and if it happens to be in one of the sessions we're talking about that's related to that, we'll talk about what the problem was, how it happened, and how we got around it as well. So there'll be those kind of tips and tricks as well. All right, let's jump right into session one, getting to know your machine. Okay, this is my machine, the 550E. As you can see, there looks like a sewing machine. And oftentimes people think when they buy an embroidery machine that it will sew as well. Only if it's a combination machine. This is not a combination. This is a dedicated embroidery machine. It does not sew. So if you're going to try to do some patchwork on here, no, not going to happen. Although you can make a quilt. I'm not talking about quilting it. I'm talking about making a quilt. I've done it on your embroidery machine. But that is in one of the more advanced sessions later on. So that's all I'm going to say about that right now. Okay, so this is the basic machine, and there's basic components that all machines have. They just may be located in different places. So, for example, my machine comes, or it doesn't come with this. This was an option that I bought. It will come with it comes with a two-thread stand, doesn't it?
No, it comes with
Oh,
the
just the
the
horizontal.
horizontal thread, uh, the 550E, 500E, 450E only comes with horizontal thread
Stand,
stand.
which is dumb. Okay. I'm not sure about Bernina's or Brothers if they come with something that hold more than one spool of thread, but there's a couple of reasons why this is an option you may want to invest in when you get your embroidery machine. The one I have on here actually mounts to the back of the machine. There are holes and screws in there that you can put this on. Not all machines will have that, but you can get standalone ones as well that you can put off to the side or behind your machine. The reason this is a good idea to have is a couple of reasons. One, okay, 5 threads. Now your machine, unless it's an industrial machine like a 7 needle or higher one or 4 needle machine, most single needle machines, you're not going to be able to have all your threads already threaded onto it. You have to rethread your machine every time you change color. That's one of the drawbacks of these kind of machines. If you had one with multi needles, you wouldn't have to do that as often
Yeah.
once it's all set up.
Yeah, every color change you do, you have to rethread your machine,
Yeah.
which can be a bit of a tedious if your machine changes threads fairly frequently.
Yeah. So you're probably thinking to yourself, then why bother with a spool holder with that? Well, because you can organize your threads a little better. I can put 5 colors out on my machine ready to go. And in some cases, if you plan things right, you're using one color repeated times, but at different points in the embroidery process. So if you can take those threads that you're going to be using more than once and put them on your thread stand, then it saves you just a little bit of time with it. Not a great deal, but it's a convenience factor in there.
Yeah, you have the 5 thread stand, but
Yeah,
I have a 2 thread
you have a two
stand.
thread stand.
But I don't usually put my extra threads on it. I'll just use it. I'll just change the threads on my stand. But isn't it also that it tends to feed the thread a bit better?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say next. Yes. Because of the way threads are wound on the spool, it's oftentimes, at least with the threads that I use, it's better to have them pull up from the thread rather than from the side of the thread. So you've got the horizontal stand there, but that is only good pretty much if you're using metallic threads. Metallic threads break much easier than regular embroidery threads, and they tend to like to come off their spool horizontally. There's less tension on it. And so I hardly never use the horizontal on here.
I have very rarely used the horizontal one.
I could. It would give me a 6th thread on there. I'd have to have one of those little caps, and I have them. You
Yeah,
put
I
on.
think the other thing is that if it's on the horizontal, it's more of a nuisance if you have to keep changing
Yeah,
threads.
yeah. It's more awkward with that. So a thread stand is a good optional buy. They're not that expensive. I think the one I have for the Janome, I think that cost me $50 for the 5.
No, I think the 5 is a little more
Is it
than
more than that
50.
now?
The 2 threads of 50,
Oh, okay. The 5 it might
and
have
the
been.
5 is maybe about 70 or
Yeah.
something.
Well, we're talking Canadian dollars too as
Yeah.
well. So in the States, 50 cents. Now another little thing here is I have another thread stand. Two of the colors you use a lot of are white and black in embroidery. And you notice that these are a little bigger than these ones. They have 5,000 meters, I think, a thread on it, whereas the other one have about what, 1,300?
1,000.
It's just 1,000 meters on. So it's 5 times bigger. They do cost more money, of course. I think one spool of this costs me about $30 Canadian.
However, the Monfil brand that I buy, they're $6.99
Yeah.
a spool.
Now we're going to talk about threads because we use different ones. We're going to talk about that a little later in this session. But I just show you, you can buy freestanding thread stands like I have here for these two, and you can get some that hold more than this as well. I've seen them on Amazon advertising they hold 20, but I don't know about that.
I've actually just used a little cardboard piece of cardboard on my thread stand to hold the spool, and I put the whole big spool on my thread stand.
Oh, okay. Good for you. Okay, that's a hack. You mean underneath because
yeah.
because those are smaller,
Yeah.
meant for the smaller ones, yeah. But because I use these colors all the time in most of my projects, that's why they're sitting there. I don't have to change them; they're ready to go. I thread it into the machine, and there I am.
Yeah, that'd be handy.
The other thing I want to point out is down here at the bottom, you see a USB drive. This is how you get your files onto your machine. We're not going to talk about that today. That's in another session where we'll talk about where do you get your files? How do you move the files from your computer to your embroidery machine? But usually your machine will come with a USB as well. It may have a few, I think it does, or maybe not. No, I don't think it did. Not with Janome. No, didn't. They have some designs built right into the machine's memory. Again, that's something we'll come to in another session. But basically, this is how you get your item.
There is if with Janome, there is a way to put a USB cord from your machine to the computer, your own computer. However, it is pretty convoluted as to how to transfer files from your computer. The easiest way on Janome is to put it through a USB drive.
Yeah, and you need to have a long cable because, well, your computer has to be really near your machine to do that as well. Yeah. Beside the fact that it's very, very, they do not explain it very well, and I have never had, it's hit and miss whether it works or not.
I have tried it, and it took me about 2 hours to figure out how to do it, and I'm a computer guy, so I had a hard time figuring out where on my computer it ended up showing up as the drive.
Yeah.
So I just stick with copying files to a USB. It's much easier. USBs are portable, they're inexpensive, and they keep your files handy.
Yeah. So. There is one other trick with that as well, but again, we'll talk about that when we come to that session where we're talking about transferring files to your machine. This, I'm just showing you the basic components when you take it out of the box. And you'll notice there's a little stylus here. That's because it's a touch screen. I seldom use the stylus. I use my finger on it, just like an iPad or whatever. Now, hoops. Okay, we're going to come back and talk about the sizes of hoops and things like that. But right now, this particular machine comes with 4 hoops.
5 hoops.
No, one's an optional one.
Oh yeah, no, that's true. 4 hoops.
It comes with these 3. The little one, the medium size, this other that's square, then a rectangular one. This one was an optional hoop. We bought it. We both have one of these. It's a size that I really like. I use it a lot with it, so it was worth the extra money. And it does come with a huge hoop. This one, and you'll notice this one, the clamping system's a little different from these. This has got your standard screws on the side. This one has these levers, and this I think measures what, about 14 by 7.9 inches by 14.2 inches.
Yeah, and these hoops also have a support system where they add magnetic clips to hold it together as well.
Now, the reason Janome designed this big hoop was they tried to say that you can put a quilt, a full-size quilt, and you can quilt it in using this hoop, and that's why it has the clamps and why it comes with the magnetic pieces as well. And we're not going to get into that. Maybe when we start talking about doing a quilt in a hoop, we'll talk more about that. But in my experience, it's more trouble than it's worth if it works at all. But we'll talk more about that. And just to let you know what sizes these hoops are, starting in the top left corner, that's the smallest hoop, and it's what they call an SQ14B. SQ in Janome terms means square, and it's a 5.5 by 5.5 inch hoop. And then the one next to that is known as the 20B square.
It's square.
SQ20B is actually what they tell you. These numbers, they have them actually written. It's very faint, but they're over where that little black knob is. We'll talk about the little black knob later on. That's where they're written, and they're not easy to see. Now, some people, though, I know have taken a Sharpie and just brushed over top of it because they're raised up and it shows up more. I haven't done that because I pretty much know what they are. But that hoop, the 20B, it's square, is 7.9 inches by 7.9 inches. And then the 20B rectangular, or RE20B, this one right down here, that one measures 7.9 inches. No, wait. No, 5.5
inches wide and 7.9 inches long.
Yeah. And the 28B, I don't have a measurement for 28B.
Yeah, I do. The 28B is 7.9 inches wide and 11 inches long.
Yeah. And then this big sucker, the 36 RE36B, is 7.9 inches by 14.2 inches.
So yeah, so this 550E machine has a maximum width of your embroidery for 7.9 inches, and the hoop sizes vary in size from 5.5 to 14.2 in length.
Yeah. So this is something to consider if you don't own an embroidery machine right now. If you buy an embroidery machine, these machines run about, how much are they now? Canadian, 3,600?
No, right now the list price in Canada is 3,999, and they sell for about $3,000 Canadian.
Okay.
But the where was that? I can't remember what I was saying.
Oh, great. Senior moment. Embroidery brain. Okay, so what I was going to say is, well, now you got me all confused out of this as well.
Okay, where's the train of thought going?
Oh, I was going to say that if you can buy cheaper machines, less expensive machines, put it that way, in any line. But look at how many hoops you're going to get. Because generally speaking, the more you pay for an embroidery machine, the more choice of hoops and the bigger the hoops.
Yeah, like if you buy an embroidery machine, the best way is, I have heard people say, well, I don't really need a big hoop because I'm only going to do small embroidery projects. Well, my opinion is you should get a machine with the biggest hoop that you can get. Because you're when you start finding out all the things that you can do with your embroidery machine, you'll find that you'll find projects that need bigger hoops.
Yeah.
Right. And I know that there's some other optional hoops that come with the 550E, but they're all very small hoops for small embroidery projects. We've never invested in any of those hoops because we usually find that we need a larger size hoop than a smaller size hoop.
Yeah. And some of the projects later on in this series we're going to show you in the hoop projects, like making a table runner or something like that, you will want a large hoop for those kind of projects.
So if your embroidery machine, whatever brand you have, has a smaller hoop, you might not be able to do a project like that.
And you might not be able to buy later a larger hoop.
Right.
Because of the configuration of the machine.
Like the Janome machine we have is a 550E, and it takes the largest hoop, which is a 7.9 by 14. The previous model of Janome machine was a 500E, and its largest hoop was the next size down, which is the R28D, which is 7.9 by 11 inches. And the difference is, some people say, oh, well, I'll just buy the 500 machine and buy a bigger hoop, right? That won't work because the arms aren't designed on the machines to allow that hoop to go the same distance as the embroidery arm on the machine is designed for the biggest hoop.
So this is what we're talking about here. Back to the picture of the machine. That big arm that's right up against underneath the throat of the machine, that's what your hoop, and I'll show you this in a bit. This is what your hoop attaches to, and that's the thing that slides forward and back, and that the x-axis and the y-axis. Your needle does not move. Your needle just goes up and down on an embroidery machine. It doesn't move around. It's not like maybe on a long arm where you can direct the needle around. No, the way that it makes curves and all the designs is that it's that arm with the hoop on it sliding forward, backwards, up and down.
You'll notice on the foot plate on the underneath the needle that it only has a single hole. Mm-hmm. So that single hole means that that needle only goes up and down through that one hole.
No, you can't do a zigzag or something like that.
But if you look at the next model down of embroidery machine, the 500E, its arm is not as big on it.
So you can't put a bigger hoop on it. It has a maximum size. Also, if you're going to buy, like we said, we bought an optional hoop. We bought this one down in here in the bottom right hand corner. That's the 28 B. That hoop cost about $200 Canadian. Yeah. You might find a third party hoop. This is an original Janome hoop. You might find a third party hoop that size that might work on your machine for less, but the chances are probably not. And also, if it's that much cheaper, it may not
actually
be that good.
I did end up having to buy, because I wanted an R28B hoop, and I did end up having to buy a hoop that wasn't a standard Janome hoop, but it is almost exactly the same. But I had to pay the same price as the Janome hoop for that hoop. So
yeah,
there was no cost savings.
So one other feature that most machines come with, or should come with, let me switch right here, is the extended table. And I've pulled mine back when I took this picture so you could see it just slides on. It has legs underneath and it goes in, sort of like an extended table on a sewing machine. But it's a very important feature, and as far as I know, all embroidery machines come with this, or they may have them built right into it so they're not removable. I don't know which.
Yeah, they may all have a large base on their machines, or they may not have a removable table. But the function of this table is to support your hoops while it's embroidering.
Yeah, because your hoops extend further than the base of the machine, and you don't want them hanging out in air because that puts stress on the arm that the hoop is attached to. So either they will have made the machine so that is built right onto it, it's not removable, or it is removable. And the reason it's removable is I have never used my machine without it. I mean, you just wouldn't, like what Walter just said, it gives support, but it's for travel purposes because the legs on this fold up. It's easier if you get a sewing bag, a machine bag, you can pack your machine into it and it takes up less space. And I think that's the only reason why it comes off. Okay, so that's about hoops. There'll be more about hooping when we get into doing projects and using stabilizers and what that all is about, but that's not on today's session. That is in a future session. But what we want to talk a little bit about is bobbin cases. Okay, these are the two standard bobbin cases that a Janome takes. This is a top-loading machine. Your bobbin drops into these. But you'll notice on these two bobbins, there's a little color mark. On the one on the left, it has a little red mark. The one on the right has a yellow mark. This has to do with tension. Certain projects that you'll do, and we'll come to these, need more tension than others. The red is your normal tension. So the kind of thing like if you're doing monograms or you're doing something on a t-shirt, anything that you're only going through one layer of fabric basically and maybe some stabilizer. But if you're doing something like, say you're doing a bag front, and Walter does these all the time, do you use the red or the yellow?
I use the red. I've never used anything but the red.
Okay.
In fact, our machines came with the red, and I have only ever used the red.
Well, I do use the yellow. In fact, I think right now what's in my machine is probably yellow because I use it more than anything else. But I find if I'm going through several layers of fabric and stabilizers, it just makes my stitches pull a little nicer. And if I'm doing freestanding lace, I will use the yellow as well because in freestanding lace, it is what it says. It is all thread. It isn't going through any fabric.
That's interesting because I've only ever used the red even on
Well, it's good for
freestanding.
you, but that's why yours look like a mess.
Oh, yeah, right.
Okay, fine. Whatever. You get used to it. There is a third bobbin. It has a blue dot. This is touted as being for free motion quilting if it's in your regular Janome domestic machine, or it's for quilting a quilt in your hoop. Needless to say, it's a different tension as well for that. Um, is it important to you to have the right color of bobbin in your machine? You just heard Walter say he never uses the yellow. He uses the red. Guess what? If you're not having a problem, leave it in. But if you find that your stitches are a little loose, or you're getting a lot of bird's nests, or your thread is breaking a lot, then you might want to try the all other bobbin,
Now,
the other color.
the Janome manual happens to state that you should use the yellow bobbin if you're using non-Janome brand
Yeah,
thread. And that's we both use non-Janome
and that's a lie.
type red, and that's a thread, and that's a lie because I use standard thread and I only ever use the red dot
Yeah.
bobbin.
The only reason I switch bottoms is if for the reasons I just stated. If I'm having a problem, I find that sometimes solves the problem.
Yeah, mind you, Steve's done much more different types of embroidery than
Yeah, so
I have,
listen to
so.
me and not him. Yeah. Okay. All right, so that's bobbins. Or bobbin cases. Now bobbins. I use pre-wound bobbins. We both do for the most part, and I use white. Now, you will read instructions in certain projects you're doing. They tell you that you should have a bobbin the same color as the thread that you're doing, so you need to wind those. Or, well, guess what? I have never done that ever. Um, because of the way that things get embroidered out or what project you're doing. First of all, if you're doing a project where no one's going to see the back of it because it's being sewn into something, like say a bag, and so you've got a lining on the bag, so no one's ever going to never see the back of your embroidery. Or if you're doing a table runner that has a backing to it, you usually put the backing on after you've done all the embroidery, so no one's going to see that. Even when you're doing freestanding lace, I have found um, the color seems to come through from the top bobbin enough that, yeah, you can tell there's a right and a wrong side, but it's not worth your effort to
Yeah,
wind bobbins for every color you're going to do in a project. Some projects could have 20, 30 color changes.
yeah. The only time that sometimes they might ask you to wind a bobbin is if you're doing a project where, like a freestanding lace project, where you might see two sides of the project. But even then, it doesn't necessarily mean that you should do that or have that. I have done it with a black bobbin before on a project in the past, but I used pre-wound black bobbins with that. And it's also not good to wind bobbin thread with your top embroidery thread because a lot of times the machines can't handle the same thread as the top thread. They need
which
a smaller thread for the bottom.
which brings us to, well, we're going to talk about threads in a minute, but um the pre-wound bobbins are the ones we buy are 60 weight, I think.
Yeah, they're 60
Yes.
weight. The ones that we have are 60 weight. You can buy other bobbins that are like by Wonderfill, and they're an 80 weight.
Mhm. They're a finer thread.
And the reason for that is you've got more thread on your bobbin, so they last longer.
Yeah. The pre-wound bobbins
The
is what we'll.
pre-wound bobbins. And if you're on the Janome machines, you have to use a class 15 bobbin.
Yes, that's important. So if you're getting pre-wound bobbins, make sure they're class 15 bobbins. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Now, if you're on Bernina, I think they use different bobbins.
You
So
probably do.
you would have to look at what bobbins Bernina uses.
Now, we buy our pre-wound bobbins by gross lots. We buy a box of 144 pre-wound for about $25 from a Canadian company located in Quebec. And you've heard us talk about it on Idiot Quilter and here on So Chatty before, called monfil. monfil.ca. They have the best price. Never had a problem with their bobbins. Use them in both my domestic machines and in my embroidery machine. And at $25 for a box of 144 pre-wound bobbins, that's a darn good price. Wonderful, if you buy them at your quilt store, come in a cart of what, about 12, I think,
Yeah, I think it's 12.
for about $26.
No, it's $14.
Is it $14? Yeah. I thought it was more than that.
No,
Oh,
but
maybe
still,
colored ones I was
yeah,
looking
colored ones are more expensive.
at. Yeah. But yeah, good deal. Work really well. No problems with that.
And I have read on forums and things like that, don't use pre-wound bobbins in your embroidery machine. And that's a lie.
That's a lie.
We use them all the time.
Yeah.
We have not had an issue.
And a lot of people wind their own because, price wise, they think it's cheaper and the whole bit. But as Walter's already said, pre-winding your bobbins with the thread you're going to use in the top may or may not work. Plus, you're going to be winding a lot of bobbins.
I have tried to use top thread in the bobbin, and you end up having more problems with it.
Yeah.
And in some cases, it just won't sell.
Now, I'm sure there's somebody out there who's going to say, I have been machine embroidering for years, and I've always only wound my own bobbins and never had a problem. You do you. Okay?
Yeah, exactly.
We're just explaining what we like.
The other thing is, if you do pre-wind your bobbins, it would be an advantage to you to get a 60 weight thread and wind them from that. In fact, when Janome sold the machine, we did get a spool of thread, and they called it bobbin thread.
Yeah, to wind your own bobbins. Yeah. Still have it. I think I used it once. Didn't like it at all. But anyway, so that's about bobbins and about, all of that. Okay, then what goes along with thread? Needles. Okay, now I use embroidery needles. These happen to be what are called Floriani Chrome, which I don't think they're making them anymore. I really like those needles. I like Floriani's thread, and that's the thread I use. But it doesn't matter. You can use, as long as it's meant for embroidery, and this is the size, a 90/14 needle. Can you use other size needles? Well, yes, you can, but you have to match your thread with it. And your machine may or may not like other weights. Like if you try to use a thicker thread, even if you have the right needle for the thicker thread, your embroidery machine might not like it.
The embroidery thread that we use, Steve and I use, Steve uses a different brand than I do, but they're both 40 weight threads.
And we're going to
40 weight polyester.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that too. And the polyester thing is important as well. We'll talk about that. But look for, if you're buying, these are it says Floriani Chrome, but they're made by Schmitz. Schmitz is one of the biggest manufacturers of needles. I'm sure you know that. And they have like quilting needles, top stitch needles, jean needles, that. They also have embroidery needles. Are they any more expensive than the needles you put in your domestic machine? Not really. So, you can...
And there are other needles that sometimes your dealer may recommend. I would, if you want, you try different needles, but go with the ones that you feel are best. We've just found that these seem to be best. And
for us,
we've had, our dealer has recommended some other needles that are Janome needles called Purple Tips.
Don't like them.
And I've tried them, and I just find that I have more problems with them than if I use the chrome needles. So
another little...
or not the chrome, or the embroidery specific needles.
Yeah. Don't worry about that. This package of needles says Foriani Chrome. Ignore that. What's important is the word embroidery and the numbers 90/14. Okay. You may be using a 90/14 in your domestic machine already, so you may have some. However, what makes an embroidery needle different from a quilting needle? I have no idea.
As far as I
I
know,
think it's the
the
sharpness.
eye is that they're sharp, and the eyes on the needles are designed for the fact that the needle punches through your thread thousands of times.
Yeah. So they're a little bit
So
more
you may
sturdy.
find if you use a different kind of needle, like a jeans needle or a non-embroidery needle, you may find your thread start to shred.
Yeah. So if you have, so this is the tip. If you're getting a lot of thread breaks, if your thread is shredding, which would lead to a thread break, if you're getting a lot of bird's nests rapidly, check the size of the needle you have in your machine. Make sure that the thread you're using is the right weight of thread for that size of needle. If it's not, fix that. Get the right size needle with it. Your manual should tell you what needle to be
Right.
using, the size. Also, you it's not all threads are equal. We're talking about a 40 weight thread, but a 40 weight embroidery thread, a thread meant for embroidery, is different from a 40 weight, say, Aura fill for your domestic sewing
Yeah.
machine. They have the same weight, but you see, the problem is with the weights, they're not standardized.
No, like apparently I use Steve uses Floriani thread. I use the stuff Monfil sells. It's called, they call it Super B or Superb or whatever. And the 40 there were both 40 weights, but the Floriani is slightly thicker than the 40 weight that I
Yeah.
use.
We're going to come back to threads in a minute too, as well. We're jumping a little bit ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
But it's important that you use the right needle. And don't be stingy with your needles. You are going to go through needles, okay? I usually, well, first of all, if you hear your needle punching through your fabric, like it's sort of going thump, 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 it won't be that loud, but you'll know once you get to know your machine, you'll know the sounds. Then it's time to replace the needle. I usually replace my needle after every major job or jobs. If I've done a whole lot of embroidery, because remember, there's a lot of thread going through this fabric, and it's not just the needle going through fabric. Your needle is going through thread in some cases. When it does its satin stitch, it's overlapping on other stitches, or when it's changing colors to give a shading, it will go over other threads that have already put down.
Yeah, I could
So
go through a couple layers of threads, your layer of fabric,
your
a
stabilizers,
couple few layers of stabilizer. That's going through a lot of stuff,
yeah,
and it's doing it over and over and over again. In fact, some of the embroidery projects that I've done have had 80,000 stitches in it.
yeah. So yeah. So don't cheap out. Your needles aren't that expensive. Don't cheap out. Have a supply readily available. When in doubt, change the needle if you're having problems. And then check your thread size and things like that. We'll come back to
Yeah.
troubleshooting in another session. That's just a little tip of the iceberg. Okay, let's talk about threading your machine. Threads like pretty much like a normal sewing machine. But don't skip any of the steps. Make sure you study your manual for it because it can affect tension.
It does have a couple of different guides that goes through that for a special for that's dedicated for tension.
Yeah.
So, which
But
isn't really that much different than a regular sewing machine.
no.
But it is set up for to provide a certain kind of tension.
But make sure, no matter how experienced you are in threading a domestic sewing machine, make sure you check your manual when you get your machine and follow it exactly. Okay, because it may not seem like certain things it's going through. If you miss a step, it's not going to make any difference. Yes, it will. So make sure you study the manual for that for your particular machine. Okay, so I was talking about how the hoop attaches on our particular machine. Our machine, the bar is probably backwards to what you've seen on other brands of machines. A lot of them have the bar out here, out on the opposite end.
Mm-hmm.
But ours are on the inside. But it doesn't matter where it's located. Just make sure you put the hoop on properly. Now, in our case, there's two little silver posts here. There's a little black knob on here. You pull the little black knob off, it slides in over those two little posts, then you let go, it's spring loaded, the little black knob, and that locks the hoop in place. It's very easy to remove and to put on. And other machines might have a piece that's basically you slide the hoop in and you don't even see where it connects, it just snaps in. But really, hooking up your hoop is not a problem. Again, check your manual for your particular machine. Move to the next slide. Okay, so now we're going to talk about very briefly the screens on an embroidery machine. Embroidery machines are computerized, like probably like your sewing machine, unless you're using a featherweight with it. And there are multiple screens, and you need to know your screens. Now, this is just an overview on the Janome, but I'm sure you'll see some similarities if you have a non-Janome brand. This is the initialization screen. It comes up first. It means, okay, I'm on. You can now select whatever file you want to start printing out. It comes with a few built-in things on the Janome. That's what the flower shows you. If you push that button, you get a list of designs. If you push the one with ABC, that's a couple of alphabet sets for monogramming. And the one with the little grid on it, that's an editing screen. We'll come back to that. Now, you will have settings on your machine, and you'll probably have settings in two different categories. One are what they call on the Janome common settings. This is where you can set up your screen contrast. You can, if it's going to be in inches or in millimeters, and there's a few other things like the brightness of the lights, whether they're on or off, that kind of thing. They're general settings. Then you have the embroidery settings, and these have like your tensions. Our particular machine has an auto tension on it. You never have to touch this. I have never touched
I've never touched the tension.
No. Our machine has a bobbin sensor, meaning that when it gets down to a certain level, it will the machine will stop and come up and tell you that you need to add another bobbin. It's a little bit annoying, but it's a good thing to have because I find with the Janome, I have it set to the lowest right now, 0.5, which I'm not sure what 0.5 is supposed to mean. I'm sure the manual might tell you this. But basically, I still have about a quarter of my bobbin left usually when that sensor comes on.
That's interesting because I don't have that much left.
Maybe I need to set that even lower. I don't know. Or I don't know, higher or lower. I don't know, but that's what mine is set at.
I have it set at the lowest, whatever that is.
Okay, well, I suppose I can go down a little lower. According to this, the thing looks like it could. But I don't let that go to waste because what I do is I pop them out and take them over and have a little holder by my sewing machine. And because I use pre-wound bobbins that work in both the embroidery and the domestic machine, I just take those and I use them up on when I'm doing domestic sewing, when I'm doing my patchwork. So nothing goes to waste. But not all machines necessarily have a bobbin sensor on it. It is a good thing, though, to have on a machine, because there's nothing worse than you've been, like we said, 80,000 stitches, and you've been stitching this thing for an hour and a half, and you've gone away from it and come back thinking it's all finished, and you've been stitching air.
Well, most machines will.
Probably stop when it runs out.
The Janome embroidery machine will stop if it runs out of bobbin.
Yeah.
Because I've had it happen.
So. Yeah, but anyways, that's one of the features. Now, there's other things you can set up in here too, but I'm not going through every one of the screen. We will come to these when we're actually doing a project. Now, the other thing is, of course, there will be a screen to allow you to select whatever file you're going to stitch out. And on the Janome machine, it usually comes up with a little tiny picture. I don't use the little pictures very often unless it's something I'm really familiar with. I usually use the another option, which is it'll tell you what the name of the block is, and it'll tell you what type of file it is. We're not going to worry about DSTs and Jeffs today. But if I go back to this screen, you also notice up here, it tells me what hoop I need for these designs. I think most machines will tell you what hoop, so you don't use the wrong one. The one thing is it will not stitch out if you try to put in well, actually, no, it will.
Yeah, it'll attempt.
It'll attempt to, and that, so if I put in the 14B, which is a much smaller hoop than the 20B, and let it go, I have the danger of my needle going through the plastic edges of my hoop, or worse.
You could damage the needle, you could damage the hoop.
You could damage the machine.
Damage the machine. So you have to make note of what size hoop. You can always go a hoop size bigger.
Yeah.
But you can't go smaller.
You can't usually go smaller.
Because sometimes on this machine it may come up and say a hoop size that you may not have.
Yeah.
But you can go a hoop size bigger.
You may have a bigger one. For example, it may have come up before. I've had patterns come up that said they wanted me to use the 28 hoop, and I didn't own one at that point in time, so I went to the 36, the next size up. There is a way to go down a size, but that's within the editing features that are in your machine, where you can reduce the size, but you can only reduce the size, at least in a Janome machine, by no more than 20% smaller than the original. And you can go the other way too, but only 20%. And again, you have to make sure you're using the right hoop with that. We'll come to that when we talk about editing, but that's not today. Another screen that I never use is the help screen. Janome has this to tell you, like, winding a bobbin, replacing the needle, threading the machine, inserting the bobbin. Okay, so you just click on that and it has a bunch of pictures showing you what to do for each one of those. I've been using this machine for quite a long time. I don't need those. It's just a way for common everyday things, especially when you're first using the machine, where you don't have to refer to the manual. So those are the basic screens, except for this one. Now, this screen is a very important screen. This is the editing screen. Most embroidery machines allow you to do a certain amount of editing, not a lot. And I'm not going to talk about this in any more detail today. We'll talk about that when we start getting into more projects. But this is where you can add things, you can reduce the size of them, you can change the position, the orientation.
Yeah, you can rotate the
design.
Or
you can also duplicate it in certain parts, and this basically is a graphic version of what your hoop area looks like. Our particular hoops come with a plastic overlay grid that you can put in for positioning. I never use them.
I've never used it.
I did use it once when I first got the machine, but they're more of a pain in the butt than anything. They're a positioning. If you needed to position something very exactly, well, this would be the screen where you go and you might use one of those overlays. We'll talk about those in another session. Okay, let's move on to threads and thread types. I use Floriani threads, and this is some of my threads. These ones are out right now because I'm doing a project where some of these, or the last couple of projects I've been using, these were the threads I had pulled out for that. I just haven't put them away. I have an Alex drawer unit, a tall Alex one. And each of those drawers, there are 9 drawers. And each drawer, I have them all laid out there. I built little holders. Like you see the holders that these are in. I printed those on my 3D printer, but I have something I made out of cardboard, actually just keeps them nice and neat and upright. Well, it did. I need to clean up my drawers. I have over 600 spools of thread of Floriani, and I still don't have every color. Is that overkill? Yeah, it is. I admit to it, but I'm a Floriani thread slut. I love their threads. It's got a nice shine to it. It is a polyester thread. I believe it's a polyester. Is it total polyester? Or is it wrapped around a cotton core? Or is it cotton core?
It may have a core. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Most embroidery threads are polyester. Why? Because of the strength. Because there's a lot of tension on your thread.
It used to be, before polyester came out, rayon was popular.
Yeah.
And it still exists. But one of the problems with rayon is the colors may fade
over time,
over time.
where these don't. So they claim, anyways. Maybe after 100 years, but then who cares? I like Floriani. Floriani is not particularly inexpensive, but it's not that bad. I think it's what we're
Well, the
paying
only
about
problem you
seven.
may have is Floriani, though, and people may have with Floriani, is that it's hard to get.
Yeah, my dealer is a dealer for Floriani because I bought the machine at my dealer at Ultimate Sewing. That's why I started on Floriani threads, because that's what they had, and I do like them. But you can use other threads. If you're a long arm quilter, or, well, if you use glide threads, this is part of my collection of glide threads. Now they're in with my Lucy, with my long arm. I have used a few of them in embroidery projects, and they work fine. Glide is a good thread as well, but these are primarily I use with my long arm. But you can use them. And then Walter, and I don't have a picture of this, but Walter uses thread he buys from Monfil, which is called,
It's called Super B, or Superb, if you want to call it.
it's the way that they lay it out. They have a capital S on the at the beginning of the word, and they have a capital B at the end of the
They
word.
look very much the same as the Glide and the Floriani. They have a nice shine to them. They're a much less expensive.
A lot less, half the price.
Well, I can buy a large cone of it for $6.99. So
When you say a large cone,
which is 5,000 meters.
which is like those big, that white and black one I showed you earlier, these ones only have 1,000.
And the 1,000 meter cones the size of the Glide sell for $2.99.
Yeah,
and that's in Canadian dollars.
and Glide runs about $6.99 a spool, depending on where you buy it in Canadian dollars. So yeah, so the Superb,
The Superb is actually, I think it's from an Asian company. I think, I'm not 100% sure, I can't say for sure it is, but there is a company called Designs and Machine Embroidery in the US, and they sell and a thread called Exquisite. And as far as I can tell, I've matched the colors from Super B to Exquisite, and the numbers are all the same. So I have a feeling that they're the same product.
yeah.
But the Super B embroidery works fine in my machine. I use it. I sometimes, if I have a color that I can't match with the Super B, I'll switch out Floriani for it sometimes.
Yeah. And you can do that. You can switch out your brands. You can use different brands on the same project. Yeah, you have to get used to how, you know how domestic sewing machines are temperamental about their threads. So are embroidery machines. So whatever works for you. And there are other brands. There's a lot of other brands. There is Isacore. I have never used Isacore, but I know if you buy a design from Oklahoma Embroidery, what do they call that?
OESD.
OESD, which I buy a lot of designs from OESD. Their thread of choice is Isacore because they sell it. It's a good thread. I have never used it because it's not available in my area.
Is Metler the other one?
Metler. I have used Metler.
Makes a good embroidery thread.
You can actually use Aurifil.
There's another one called Gunold that is an embroidery thread.
There's Anton, or what the Anton something, right? It's a hyphenated name, Anton Anderson something. I don't know. There are other brands of embroidery threads, but by a brand name that's popular. Don't buy the ones that you see on Amazon. That there's a brand called Brother. It is not.
No, they call it Bro Thread.
Or Bro Thread.
And the company, a lot of people think it's Brother Thread, but it's not.
And they're doing that on purpose. It's a Chinese company.
It is. I went to a sewing class in the group that I at the Ultimate Sewing, which is the company that we the dealership that we have that sells our machines. And some people had purchased their threads on Amazon, this Bro Thread stuff, and it was causing problems with the machines. They were having trouble stitching them out. So I wouldn't recommend that brand.
No. But like I said, when you first get into machine embroidery, you're going to want to buy all kinds of thread. Buy some basic ones, do a simple project, try out a different, maybe buy a couple of colors in several different brands that are available to you in your area, see what you like best. As I said, you could actually use Aurifil in it as well. The only difference is Aurifil doesn't have the sheen that embroidery
Yeah.
threads have. You know, if you look at this picture, the Glide and the Floriani have a shine to them, which looks really nice in a quilting project. But if you're not into shine, if you just want matte, and I don't know why you would, because you want your embroidery to sparkle, you could probably use Aurifil. Well, I know you can. I have used Aurifil.
Yeah, Orfil will give you a matte finish, whereas the embroidery, um, uh, the polyester here, I have actually used embroidery threads in my domestic
Yeah,
sewing
you can
machine,
do that too. That
or
will work.
a couple of for top stitching or something like that,
Yeah,
and it adds a nice color to your top
because the
stitch
colors are
quilting.
usually a brighter or deeper shade than what you get in like standard uh, domestic machine threads. Now, I said about Aurifil, uh, using that. Aurifil's expensive,
Yes, it is.
and you go through a lot of thread. So Aurifil's like, I think right now, Aurifil's in some places is here in Canada, it's like $17 or $18 a spool. I know in the States it's 21, $22 American for a spool of Aurifil. I think we get it cheaper because we have a distribution center out west
Yeah.
here in Canada, and I don't think there's one in the States. And it's an Italian
Yeah,
brand.
so it would cost you a lot.
Yeah.
And you need a number of colors when you're doing embroidery,
Yeah.
depending on what project you're doing. You can get away with less depending on what project you're doing, but it is nice to have a variety of colors available for you
And we're going
to
to,
embroider with.
in another session, we're going to talk about how you choose your colors and how you figure out if you don't have the exact color that your file asks for, your pattern asks for, what do you do? And we're going to go through that as well, but not right now. Um, okay, so the last thing that we want to talk about before we give you a little bit of a spoiler alert on future projects is something that's very basic to all sewing machines, embroidery machines. Cleaning. Cleaning. You have to keep your embroidery machine clean and you have to keep it oiled. Now, oiling your machine is not difficult. It's basically the same ways you'd oil your sewing machine. You put a drop of oil on the wick underneath the bobbin case. And you clean it usually the same way as you clean a domestic machine. Brush out the lint and stuff like that. Now, there are some deeper oiling points, which are not, depending on your machine. We know how to take our machine apart and get at these other points that only need to be oiled every blue moon. But your manual may or may not mention those, and you may not want to take your machine apart for that. That is when you'll want to take it into your dealership and have them do, general maintenance, cleaning, and oiling of the machine.
However, in the 550E manual, there is directions on how to do the oiling.
Yeah, that's basically what I implied with it when I said check your manuals for it. And there may be for the Berninas and for the other machines out there too. I don't know. Is it important to make sure you maintain your machine? Yes, because you spent a lot of money on this.
And if your embroidery machine, when it needs to be oiled, will start making funny noises.
Yeah, it'll start to sound like it's grinding, or you'll know. You'll get to know your ear is one of your best repair or maintenance reminders, because if your machine's starting to make a noise you're not used to hearing with it, something needs to be fixed.
The other thing is if you have a sewing machine or an embroidery machine that's been sitting in a box for 3 years that you have not taken out to embroider with, and then you take it out and you try to embroider with it, there is a possibility that you may need to take it in for maintenance to have it oiled, because the oil may have dried out while it's sitting in the box.
Yeah, you wouldn't think, but it does. It does. And we have experienced that firsthand, not with one of our machines, but with a machine that,
Well, a lady I know recently sold her combination machine to another lady, and she only sewed with it. She never used the embroidery module. And the new lady wanted to use the embroidery module and was having a problem with it. And she asked me what I thought might be wrong with it. And I said, since you've never used it, it probably needs to be oiled
and that was the
and deep
problem.
cleaned.
And that fixed it up.
And that fixed it.
Something as simple as that, you would think. Okay. So on this session, then, we just given you an overview of machines. What we're going to do right now is we're just going to flash for you a few pictures of what we're going to talk about in the future in terms of projects. And these aren't in any particular order. What you see in front of you right now is what we call freestanding lace, which is lots of fun to do. Then, of course, Walter loves to make bags, and you know that, and he loves to use his embroidery machine for decorating the fronts of those bags. You can make three-dimensional items too, and they are a lot of fun. They take a while to do. They are usually a combination of freestanding lace and in the hoop applique as well, and then they get assembled. They have special little features on them that allow you to put them together. Of course, in the hoop projects, I love doing in the hoop applique. This is going to be a table runner. This is just a couple of pieces. You need to usually use your regular sewing machine to sew the pieces together, but the rest of it's all done in the hoop. Another example of a three-dimensional object, Walter made this nutcracker. That's all embroidered parts. Again, freestanding lace and in the hoop applique. This, I was talking about, you can make quilts, wall hangings as well. This is a New York beauty. This was all done completely in the embroidery machine, including the quilting of it. And we'll talk about those kind of projects as well. I've done many of these types of projects and I love them. There's another bag. The designs are great. And you can see with the thread that Walter's using here, the colors. And you notice the different colors in this. The more colors you have in a design, yes, it's going to take longer to create, but the end result's going to be worth it. Because, just the way that the sheen on that thread makes it look like that looks like glass. And of course, this is a close-up of some of the things he put on some Christmas bags as well. And you see how detailed these types of embroidery are.
Yeah, you're talking about 60, 70,000 stitches in one of these designs.
Yeah. And there's some more of his lovely bags. And yeah, that's all we got to show you. But there's a whole lot of other types of projects you can do too. And we're going to talk about those over the next few weeks as we go through this. So next week, session number 2, we're going to talk about files and patterns and project types in a little bit more detail. We're going to talk about where do you find files, first of all? How do you buy them? What was that?
Did you show those down there when you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You're just the producer. I'm the talent.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Anyways, now you've taken me right off topic. What we're talking about next week, we're going to show you where to get files, how to get them from your computer to your embroidery machine, what do you do with them once they're there, and what kind of projects can you do with these files and things like that. So that's what's coming up next week. So I hope you'll get a lot out of that as well, and I hope you got a lot out of this session. Again, if you have questions about anything we said today, you can put them in the comments below, and we'll try to address them next week when we start session 2. Okay, any final comments about machine embroidery or plans for it that you want to make?
No, I want to do some more projects like what you do. And I actually wouldn't mind, more of the applique stuff that you've done just to try it out. But I've done a little bit of that when I made the the houses and and the nutcracker and that. So I mean, it's all pretty much the same. It's just slightly different.
Yeah, it is. And I just thought of this too. As we get going on about projects and things like that, we'll be showing you some specialized tools that you may want to invest in. Not expensive tools, but like a pair of what they call duckbill scissors or applique scissors are a good thing to have if you do in the hoop applique. And if you hate applique, and I used to hate applique, I don't so much anymore. Doing applique in the hoop on an embroidery machine is a breeze. Is a breeze. You will be so thrilled when you see how easy it is. You'll want to do a lot of it. And you can do some fantastic things within the hoop applique. But enough about that. We'll be starting to talk about all the other things. There's a lot of excitement coming up in machine embroidery. Okay, so that's it for us today. I hope you found this useful, and we'll see you next week for session 2 of machine embroidery. Bye for now.
Bye for now.